Hi everyone! It's the end of May and time for the first tour of my subtropical fruit garden. We are located in the Santa Barbara area between Southern California and Central California. We are 2 miles from the ocean at about 100 feet elevation. The climate zone is USDA zone 10A. Before I begin, I would like to thank all my viewers and invite you to subscribe to my channel. I have over 60 fruit plants, trees, shrubs, vines. A little over half of them are evergreen. About half of the plants grow in the backyard and the rest of them in the front yard. Let's begin the tour. These enormous ash trees grow along the road and provide some late afternoon shade to the front yard as well as backyard. We'll start the tour here at the edge of the backyard. We'll go around the backyard, then around the front yard, and we'll end the tour at the other side of this fence at the edge of the front yard, where we'll see banana and mulberry. Alright, the first tree is the mountain ash. The variety is Rabina. This tree originates in Russia and I planted it about 2 months ago. Seems to be growing quite nicely. Next tree is still in the pot. This is a Mandarin, gold Nugget Mandarin. It's a seedless Mandarin from California. It was introduced in 1950. I will plant the Mandarin over here shortly. The next tree is Persimmon. This persimmon seems to be a very slow growing one. I planted it about 3 years ago. It's growing quite slowly. It never flowered yet. So hopefully it will flower next year. Here in the pot we have Einset red seedless grape. Again planted just a couple months ago and starting to grow. The next tree is another persimmon. This is Fuyu Jiro persimmon. This persimmon was also planted about 3 years ago. It flowered for the first time about a month ago, and now a small fruit is starting to form. Hopefully we'll get our first persimmon harvest soon. Okay, the next tree is a Loquat. This tree is supposed to be champagne variety of Loquat. Seed was grafted over here. Not sure if both branches, this side and this side, are the Loquat variety, champagne variety. It's possible that one of them is the seedling. Well, we'll see. I planted it about 2 years ago. It's growing nicely. It never bloomed yet, so maybe next year it will bloom. Next we have a tea plant here. It's a very slow growing plant. It's been in the ground for 2 years. It grows new leaves and blooms every year, but grows very slowly. Okay, the next tree is a Kumquat. This is a Meva variety Kumquat. It was planted about 9 months ago. It gave us a lot of fruit in late winter, early spring. And it seems to be growing a lot of new leaves now and getting ready to bloom. Here we have several plants growing in pots. The first one is thornless blackberry variety Natchez. This is a very delicious blackberry and produces a lot of fruit. It grows a single cane every year, and at the end of the year you need to cut the cane so that the next cane replaces it, and here is the replacement cane already started to grow. next tree is a star fruit. This is the time of the year when star fruit sheds most of its leaves and starts growing new ones late in the spring. This star fruit variety is Arkin, introduced in Florida in 1976. You can see new leaves and branches are starting to develop. The next tree growing in a pot is Babaco papaya. This is not exactly a papaya. It originated in Ecuador, and it's a little more cold hardy than a regular papaya. A lot of strawberries growing in the same pot, providing a live mulch. Babaco is a very productive plant. Last year we had about 6 large papayas. Early this year we had about 12 large papayas. So there is the last small papaya hanging on the tree, and baby papayas already starting to develop. Okay, next pot is Sunshine Blue blueberry. This blueberry was in a pot for about 3 years, and it's a very productive and delicious blueberry. This is my first apple tree, Anna apple variety. This variety was introduced in Israel in 1959, with Golden Delicious being a parent. I planted this tree about 3 years ago. It's growing nicely, and you can see the Anna apples ripening. This tree is moderately resistant to fire blight. So if some flowers get infected, then only the tiny flower branch dies off and the rest of the tree is unaffected. So we did have several branches die from fire blight on this tree, and the crop would probably be larger if no fire blight happens. Very delicious apple. It's a consistent producer, very low chill variety. Here's my dragon fruit cactus. This variety is red flashed dragon fruit, variety called American Beauty. Planted it about 2.5 years ago, and it seems to be growing nicely. The next tree is a Longan. This is a Kohala variety of Longan from Hawaii. It was selected in 1954. It's been planted for about a year. Last year it grew all the leaves you can see on this tree. And early this year it started pushing the flowers. And right now the flowers are just about to open. Hopefully we'll have some Longans this year. The next plant is a Frederick passion fruit. This is a very vigorous plant. It can grow up to 20-30 feet a year. So it was planted a year ago, and you can look at the thickness of the trunk. Became that thick in just a year. We had a lot of passion fruits last year, early this year, and it's starting to bloom again. It's a very delicious passion fruit. New passion fruits are forming already. You can see how enormous this passion fruit vine is. Climbs all the way up. this shrub. Alright. Next plant is a black mission fig. I planted it exactly 3 years ago, and it's been a productive fig. We typically don't get the first Breba crop, but it produces a lot of figs later in the year. This year I grafted 5 more varieties of fig onto this black mission fig. So one of them is Panache Tiger. Here's the graft. Another is called Dame Noir. And we have Desert King graft. I have yellow long neck graft, and the last one is white Adriatic, which is just starting to grow. The next tree is the cherry of Rio Grande. So this one was planted in winter. Seems to be growing nicely. It's in the Eugenia family from Brazil. Has a very nice and shiny foliage. And supposed to have delicious cherries. Next tree is our new apricot, or Aprium in this case, Flavor Delight Aprium. It was just planted in March and seems to be growing nicely. Okay, here we have another blueberry in a pot. This is a Misty blueberry variety. It was planted about 1.5 years ago. It's also a very delicious blueberry. Blueberries are great to grow in pots because they like acidic soil, and it's very easy to make the soil acidic in a pot. Okay, the next group of trees are here getting ready to be planted as well. So the first one is the ice cream bean plant. It originated in South America and grows delicious pods which taste like cotton candy. I got this tree as a 2-inch seedling late last year, and you can see how fast it grows. Another tree is the Honeyhart Cherimoya. So this one overwintered here in the pot, and I'm getting ready to plant it near the gold nugget mandarin. It is a new mango tree. This is a Carrie mango variety, introduced in Florida in 1940. It's supposed to be a very delicious mango. So it's blooming. This is another persimmon. This variety is called Fuyu persimmon. It has very interesting leaves, much softer than Fuyu persimmon leaves. Here is another mango. This one is in the ground. It was planted a little less than 2 years ago. It's getting established, and it had very high growing branches. So this winter I cut it over here, and it grew all these bushy branches around. Now the tree structure looks much nicer, and the leaves look much healthier. So they came out all red. Now they are starting to turn green. It should be dark green in a few weeks. Alright, the next one is our giant apricot tree. This is an unknown variety of apricot. While cutting the large branches of this apricot, I counted the rings, and it looks like this apricot is over 50 years old. I could not identify the variety of the apricot. It seems to be a very low chill apricot, even though we get only 100 chill hours or 200 chill hours, it seems to produce apricots. Produces more apricots when we get close to 300 chill hours, but it's been a reliable producer every year. With this tree being so old, we might need to replace the tree when it dries out, and that's why we started to plant replacement apricots around it. So you saw the Flavor Delight Aprium, and on the other side of the apricot is a Flora Gold apricot. Flora Gold apricot was introduced in California in 1978 and has been planted here for about 2 years. Produced a single apricot last year, and we hope to have more apricots this year, so we have at least a dozen apricots ripening on the tree. The next tree is this cherry. This is a sweet cherry, variety Royal Crimson. I planted this cherry this winter. Supposed to be the first self-pollinating low chill cherry. It's a patented cherry introduced in California in 2016. Seems to be establishing just fine. Next tree is Oro Blanco Grapefruit. So I planted this tree almost 2 years ago. It gave us a lot of grapefruits the first year, but when I got into some shock mode, and didn't produce a single grapefruit last year, and it's not going to produce any grapefruits this year. But it looks like it's starting to recover, and some new growth is coming in. So it's likely that the soil it was grown in at the nursery was not good, and it just rotted after planting, preventing the roots from growing in optimal conditions. The next two trees are my avocado trees. I have 3 videos posted about these trees. The first one shows how I created this avocado hill in the clay soil where it's located. Then I had a 1-month update and 10-month update on this avocado hill. The tree on the left is reed avocado. We already had the first avocado this year. It's a very delicious and very large avocado. The tree on the right is lamb Hass, supposed to be another large avocado variety, which is also a tree which doesn't grow huge. It's supposed to be an upright tree, not a spreading tree like a regular Hass avocado. There was a sucker coming from the avocado rootstock, and I grafted the third avocado variety, Charville, Corner Charville. The grafts took, and it seems to be growing nicely. This avocado variety, the Charville avocado variety, is type B avocado, which might help in pollinating the type A avocado varieties like reed and lamb Hass. You don't need to have 2 avocado types in order to have a large crop of avocados. Like, we had a lot of pollinators when the tree was in full bloom, and small avocados are now starting to develop. The next pair of trees are my pear trees. These were planted also 2 years ago. I had a couple blooms last year and this year, but they're probably still too young to bloom. So these 2 pairs are supposed to be low chill pairs, which don't require a lot of chill hours. The pair on the right is the Kiefer pear. It was introduced in Pennsylvania in 1876, and the parents of this pear are Bartlett pear and some Asian pear. The pear on the left is Tennessee. So this one was introduced in Texas in 1980, and This pear has more of Asian pear parentage. It's thought to be this pear's parents are thought to be Tennessee pear and Hasui pear. The first year the pear's tree were shooting high without growing any lateral branches. Now after 2 years they're starting to grow more lateral branches, and hopefully will start producing pears next year. The next tree is another new addition, planted just a couple months ago. This is a pomegranate, variety Desertny from Turkmenistan. It's supposed to be a very sweet variety, tasting like an orange, sweet orange. Speaking about oranges, it is my large orange tree. So this orange tree is also very old. It's probably close to 50 years old. The variety is unknown, but the oranges taste sour most of the time, so it could be some sour orange variety. Last year I grafted several other citrus varieties onto this orange, and they're growing nicely. So this part of the tree is the variegated pink Eureka lemon. You can see it's shooting new growth, which is red in color, and you can see the leaves are variegated. The lemons are supposed to be pink as well, and can be used to make pink lemonade. So I think it's about to start blooming. Here are the grafts I made last year. So this is the first graft and the second graft. So these are both bark grafts, and both of them took, and we now have several branches of variegated Eureka lemon. Here we have Pixie Mandarin grafted. You can see with the bark grafts as well. Here we have Shamusi Sweet Orange, which is also growing very nicely. Here is the bark graft for the Shamusi Sweet Orange. The last two varieties are very vigorous. These are Caracara Navel Orange and Flame grapefruit. So this is Caracara navel orange, bark graft, two of the branches here. Seems to be growing very nicely. I hope it will start blooming next year. And this is the flame grapefruit variety. Here is the bark graft for the flame grapefruit. The flame grapefruit is very vigorous. I had to cut it several times in spring because it was growing so fast that it could have grafts by the weight of the branches. So I had to cut it over here and over here. So we now have 6-in-1 citrus tree. Hope it will start producing next year. Okay, the next one is a red baron peach tree. This peach tree grows in pot. It initially grew in the ground in the front yard, but it was sitting there for about 3 years, not growing at all. So there is something with this tree that prevents it from growing. It produces a lot of peaches, but it just doesn't grow. So I put it in pot, and you will see in the front yard I planted another red baron peach, which is growing very vigorously. Okay, the next plant is the Thompson Seedless Grape. This grape was in the ground for about 4 years. Produces grapes every year. And some crop is already starting to develop. Squirrels love Thompson Seedless Grape. I will need to think how to protect it from squirrels this year. Here we have another Eugenia. So this plant is called Pitomba. I got it as a seedling. about a year and a half ago. It's growing very slowly. Pitomba is supposed to have orange fruit which look like apricots and taste like a combination of apricot with some tropical flavors. Here we have the Corner Charville avocado. That's the avocado I took the cuttings from when I grafted it onto my lamp house avocado in the avocado hill. So this avocado was growing nicely in a pot until Southern California Edison decided to cut the trees, cut neighbor's tree to clear the poles. The contractors they hired just cut the branches and threw them down, breaking everything under it. So they broke a portion of my grape. They broke almost all the branches of this avocado tree. So they just ripped them off the tree. It broke a bunch of raspberry. Well, I'm not letting Southern California Edison here to clean the trees again. Have some vegetables beds here where we have radishes, corn, beans, tomatoes, purple tree kale, cucumbers, garlic, strawberries, spices, peppers, okay, it's time to move on to the front yard. Alright, we're in the front yard with a huge ash trees along the road, the star pine, here we have a Barbados cherry. I planted this cherry about a year and a half ago. Last year it about doubled in size, and this year is just about to start pushing new growth. And here's our fourth apricot. I planted this tree about 4.5 years ago, and this used to be a Katie apricot. Katie apricot is supposed to be a low chill apricot, However, it was growing nicely, producing very large foliage, but for 3.5 years it gave us only 2 apricots. So many people report that Carrie apricot is a very unreliable apricot, especially in low chill hour environment. So what I did, I cut the Carrie apricot and grafted the unknown apricot from the backyard. So I grafted it about a year ago, and these are the 2 branches of a cleft graft I had last year. So you can see how vigorous the growth was last year. It grew more than 8 feet, and it already produces apricots. A lot of apricots. So all of these green foliage, all the branches you see on this apricot and all the fruit came from just 2 buds grafted last year. This year I cut down the rest of the branches of Carrie apricot and I grafted the unknown variety again. So you see the 2 branches from the cleft graft took, and this branch so the growth here is this year's growth of a new graft. So now we have a clone of our productive apricot, unknown apricot with very low chill hour requirements. It's very delicious too. Medium size apricots, very juicy and very sweet. The next plant is another grape. This is Glenora black seedless grape. I planted it about 3 years ago. It never fruited before, but this year we have a lot of blooms. So I'm expecting some grapes this year. This is our Santa Rosa Plum. A very reliable producer of plums. It's been planted about 4.5 years ago and it's been producing plums every year. You don't need to thin these plums. The tree will thin the fruit itself, so it will throw all the fruit it cannot carry. With plums growing so well, here we planted another plant. This is a Mariposa plum. Supposed to be even more delicious plum. It requires a pollinator, and Santa Rosa is one of the pollinators, so it's good to grow them together. This is still a very young tree, planted a year ago, so it looks like we will have only one plum this year. The Mariposa plant was developed in California in 1923, while the Santa Rosa was introduced in California in 1906. Okay, this is the red Baron peach I was talking about. This tree was planted a little over a year ago. It was a short stick of this height, and all the branches you see grew last year. So it's about 6 feet of growth, and it already produces peaches. You can see we have about 24 peaches. Developing on the tree. This year I also grafted a small branch of Saturn peach. So the growth you see here is coming from a Saturn peach graft. So it took, and after the peaches are ripe, I will probably cut this branch so that the Saturn peach branch continues to grow. So it will become a 2-in-1 peach tree. Okay, next we have 3 more apple trees. Many apple varieties require a lot of chill hours we don't have, but this is not a hard requirement. The apples will produce even in very low chill. locations. It's been proven for most of the apple varieties. So the first apple you see here is King David variety. I planted it about 2.5 years ago. It was introduced in Arkansas in 1893, and its parents are Jonathan and Arkansas Black. And you see the two apples over here just coming out of dormancy. So these two apples together with the star fruit are the trees which come out of dormancy the latest in my garden. The second tree here is Reverend Morgan variety, introduced in Texas in 1965, with Granny Smith being a parent. This year I grafted 6 more varieties of apples on these two apple trees. So the 3 on the left and 3 on the right here, both of them have 3 other apple varieties grafted. And I decided to graft several varieties just to see which one does better. The 6 varieties I selected to graft I selected based on them being delicious apples as well as disease resistant apples. Delicious and disease resistant. So these are all the apples I could find with match with 2 criteria. So they are resistant to fire blight and resistant to powdery mildew. We have both here. Occasional fire blight and very consistent powdery mildew around May time. So like one of the grafts you see here has powdery mildew on it. So this one was grafted here. This is Hudson's Golden Gem. Here's another graft. This one is another Hudson's Golden Gem, so we'll see how they do. This is a Gold Rush graft. Seems to be very vigorous. This is the second Gold Rush, also growing, and we have Arkansas Black grafts. With King David here, the main tree being related to Arkansas Black, could be the fact why the Arkansas Black grafts are doing the worst. So typically you don't want to graft the related varieties onto each other. Alright, now we have our Reverend Morgan apple tree here. So this is one of the grafts. William's Pride seems to be taken. Here we have Liberty. Seems to be a very vigorous variety as well. This is a second Liberty graft. This is William's Pride again. A cane graft seems to be growing, and another cane. Alright, it will be very interesting to see which grafts like it here. Each of the 2 apples trees here now is a 4-in-1 apple, so we'll see which varieties do the best. The last apple tree here is Dorset Golden. This tree is 4.5 years old. Dorset Golden apple is from Bahamas, introduced in 1964, with Golden Delicious being a parent. Here we have another Eugenia Grumichama. So I planted it last winter, and it took the winter very well. We only had a few hours of below freezing temperature last winter, maybe 2 hours of 31 degree. Most of the leaves you see here are the new growth from this spring. Supposed to be another delicious tropical cherry. I hope to try it soon. Now we have a young guava hedge here with lemon guava number 1, lemon guava number 2, and 3 pineapple guavas. All 3 pineapples guavas are grafted varieties. This one is variety called Coolidge, developed in California in 1930. It's supposed to be a self-pollinating variety, but it's best to have several pineapple guavas of different varieties to ensure the pollination. It's blooming nicely and the petals are edible. It's a very beautiful plant. The next pineapple guava is called Mammoth. This one is from New Zealand, introduced in 1954. So it looks like there are only 2 flowers on this one, but this plant was a little younger when I got it. And the last pineapple guava is Nazemes. This one is also introduced in California in 1960. Very beautiful flowers and very beautiful foliage as well, with leaves being very hard, leathery leaves and very large flowers. The lemon guavas as seedlings, so they could be different, and we have a significant difference between the 2 lemon guavas on the left here and on the right. This lemon guava seems to be just coming out of dormancy. You see new buds starting to push. With its neighbor already finishing blooming, so all of the leaves you see here grew this year and it already bloomed and the fruit is starting to form. So you see 2 lemon guavas growing next to each other, very different growth patterns. The one on the right receives a little less sunlight than the one on the left, so which could explain the some difference in the timing of the 2. Alright, moving on to the last section of the front yard. So we're going through this passion fruit jungle. This is another Frederick passion fruit, also planted here about a little over a year ago. So you see how vigorous the growth is. So it keeps growing and growing, and it's already starting to grow on top of the fence. Okay, here we have a tropical guava tree. This variety is called Bemon Red from Hawaii. It was planted about a year and a half and it's growing nicely. It's a little bit in the shade here, maybe half day shade. So it doesn't grow as vigorously as it could, but it already fruited last year and gave us a few delicious fruit. Okay, so this is another fig tree. This is a white Genoa fig variety. planted about 2 years ago, and this year I grafted 2 more varieties on this fig. So this is a Col de Dame Noir graft, and we have a yellow long neck graft over here. Okay, this is our angel red pomegranate. It's been in the ground for 4.5 years. Produced a few pomegranates, but the crop was very light. So it's blooming a lot this year and it looks very lush. So we hope to have more pomegranates from this angel red variety, which is a recently introduced pomegranate variety. It was introduced in California in 2003. It's a patented variety. Here we have Sapodilla. This is a Makok variety Sapodilla from Thailand. It was planted about 1 year and 8 months ago. This is a very slow tree, one of the slowest growing trees I've ever seen. So you can see it has new leaves coming and even some flowers. So it also bloomed last year, but obviously didn't produce any fruit, with the tree being so small. Here is the graft. Makok Sapodilla. Okay, here is our banana patch. We have 3 different bananas growing here. The first one is the dwarf green from Hawaii. The second one is the dwarf noir from Thailand. And the last one is the ice cream banana from Hawaii. All of them were planted a year ago. With dwarf green and ice cream bean being just tiny plugs in a 1/4-inch pots. They grew very vigorously last year, and the dwarf noir was a 5-gallon plant last year. So it already produced a pop and might be old enough to start fruiting this year. Here is another new pomegranate we just planted. This one is Parfyanka variety from Turkmenistan. Seems to be another very delicious and very soft seeded variety of pomegranate. Mulberry black bush, planted about 2 years ago. Grows very vigorously, and this year it produced a ton of fruit. Has very small leaves and somewhat small berries, but it's very productive. This year I grafted 3 more varieties of mulberry here. Pakistan mulberry, which the graft seems to be taken, grows new leaves, and even some Pakistan mulberry from a single bud. So this is Black Beauty mulberry variety, also a graft which took. And the last one is Sweet Lavender. So it is a cleft graft here for this sweet lavender. It also seems to be growing nicely. And the last tree I will show you here in the front yard is the Big Jim Loquat. It was introduced in California in 1980, and this tree was in the ground here for about 1.5 years. If you have any questions about the fruit trees I showed you today, or any other questions, please feel free to leave your comments below, and please subscribe to see the updates on my subtropical fruit garden as it becomes the fruit forest. Thank you for watching. Bye.